Dr. Raymond Holt grabbed Claire's wrist so hard she felt the bones compress. "You touch that dog again." He snarled, his face 2 inches from hers, spit flying. "And I will have you escorted out of this building in handcuffs. You are a nurse. You are nobody. And nobody walks into my trauma bay and makes me look like a fool in front of my team." He released her wrist with a shove. The entire trauma bay went silent. Every nurse, every resident, every paramedic still holding their paperwork. And from the corner of the room, 70 pounds of military-trained muscle rose slowly to its feet and fixed its amber eyes directly on Holt. If you are new here, please subscribe and follow this story with me all the way to the end and drop a comment telling me what city you are watching from. I want to see how far this story has traveled. The night had been ordinary until it wasn't. That was the thing about trauma centers. They had a rhythm almost like breathing, slow and measured in the quiet hours. Then suddenly everything at once, all at once, and you either moved with it or you got swallowed whole. Clare Mercer had learned that rhythm the way she had learned most things in her life, by standing still, first watching, measuring the room before she ever committed to a single step. She was charting at the nurse's station at 11:42 p.m. when the radio crackled. "Inbound EMS 6 minutes out. 19-year-old female blunt force trauma to the head and chest, unresponsive, BP 60 over palp and dropping. We've got a military K9 on scene, refusing transport restraint. Handlers are requesting clearance for the animal to accompany the patient." The charge nurse, Donna Reyes, a broad-shouldered woman with 22 years behind her, looked up from her station. "Say that again." "Military K9, ma'am. Animal is in protective formation over the patient. Handlers cannot physically remove it without risking injury to personnel. Dog is trained, but it is not responding to standard commands. They're asking if the ER has a protocol." Donna looked at Claire. Claire looked back at her. "We don't have a protocol for that," Donna said flatly. "Copy that," the radio said. "We're bringing both." The next 4 minutes moved like water, finding cracks in stone, everyone spreading to their assigned positions. IV lines being primed, the trauma bay being prepped, monitors being powered up, the surgical attending being paged. Claire moved through all of it with her characteristic quiet, pulling a second crash cart into position without being asked, checking the defibrillator charge with 2 quick movements of her fingers. "Doctor." Raymond Holt came through the double doors in his white coat with his badge turned sideways, the way it always was, like he had somewhere more important to be and the badge knew it. He was 53 years old, silver-haired, and had the particular brand of confidence that comes not just from knowing things, but from never once in his career being told he was wrong. "Who called for the surgical attending?" he said, not looking at anyone directly. "I did," said Claire without looking up from the crash cart. The pause that followed had weight to it. Holt turned to look at her. His eyes moved over her the way they always did, quick dismissive landing, nowhere long enough to actually register. "And you are Clare Mercer, trauma 2 night shift. Has she been assessed?" "She's inbound. 6 minutes ago, that was the estimate. She should be here." The ambulance bay doors blew open. The sound that came in with the gurney was not the sound Claire had been expecting. She had been expecting the controlled chaos of a trauma arrival, paramedics calling out vitals, wheels clattering on tile, voices overlapping. She got all of that. But underneath it, threading through it like a current, was a low sound. A sound that raised the hair on the back of her neck before her mind even identified what it was. The dog was not barking. That was what made it so much worse. It was a Belgian Malinois, 70 pounds of muscle and focused attention, moving alongside the gurney with its body pressed against the rail, its amber eyes scanning the room in a sweeping arc that left no corner unchecked. Its lips were not drawn back. It was not lunging. It was simply evaluating, calculating. And the calculation it kept arriving at was that every single person in that room was a potential threat. 2 handlers flanked it, both in tactical gear, both keeping a careful 2 feet of distance. One of them caught Donna's eye. "He will not respond to verbal commands from unknown personnel," the handler said, and his voice was completely steady in a way that told Claire he was working very hard to keep it that way. "His name is Kodiak. He is dual certified protection and medical alert. He bonded to the patient approximately 8 months ago. We cannot sedate him without authorization from his primary handler. And his handler is not here," said the second handler, and said nothing further. Holt stepped forward. Kodiak's head swung toward him. Holt stopped. "This is a medical facility," Holt said with the precise calm of a man who has never once in his life had a 70-pound military dog look at him the way Kodiak was looking at him now. "That animal needs to be secured. Sir, with respect, we've tried. I don't care what you've tried. I have a critical patient on that gurney, and I cannot have an uncontrolled animal in my trauma bay. Somebody call animal control." "Animal control?" The handler's voice cracked slightly at the edges. "Sir, this is a certified military working dog on an active protective detail. You cannot." "I can and I will. Donegal." "Wait." The word came out of Claire's mouth before she had consciously decided to say it. It was not loud. She did not raise her voice. She simply said the word, and something about the way she said it, some quality of certainty, some frequency that had nothing to do with volume, made every person in the room turn to look at her, including Kodiak. The dog's amber eyes found her face. Claire did not look away. "Miss Mercer," Holt said, and his voice had taken on a particular tone, the tone he used with residents who overstepped, with nurses who forgot their place in the hierarchy of a trauma room. "This is not your concern." Claire was not looking at him. She was still looking at the dog. "He's not threatening," she said quietly. "He's assessing. There's a difference. If you rush this patient now, he will interpret it as an attack. You'll have injuries before you get her onto the trauma bay table. I appreciate your behavioral analysis, but someone will get hurt," Claire said, "and then she will be alone on that table while you're treating bite wounds, and her pressure will keep dropping." The room was very quiet. The girl on the gurney, Claire could see her now, properly see her, was young. So young, it made something tighten in Claire's chest. 19, the radio had said, dark hair matted against pale skin, an oxygen mask fogged with shallow, unsteady breaths. Her right hand had slid off the gurney rail and hung in the air, and Kodiak's nose was pressed gently to her wrist, reading her pulse the way his training had taught him to steady and vigilant even now. He had not left her side once. "Let me try," Claire said. "Absolutely not," Holt said. 30 seconds, Claire said. "Give me 30 seconds. You are a nurse, Miss Mercer. Not a dog handler, not a veterinarian, not—" 28 seconds now, Claire said, and she took one step toward the gurney. Kodiak's head came up. His eyes locked onto hers. Claire stopped. She exhaled slowly through her nose. She let her shoulders drop deliberately 1 degree at a time until her posture communicated nothing, no urgency, no aggression, no fear. She let the noise of the room fall away from her awareness, the way she had trained herself once, a long time ago in a different life, to let everything fall away except the one thing that required her full attention. She looked at the dog, and in a voice that was barely above a whisper, in a cadence that was measured and precise, and carried the particular weight of someone who has spoken those words before, many times before, in circumstances far darker than this. She said 2 words. The room did not breathe. Kodiak sat down, not slowly, not with hesitation. He sat the way a well-oiled machine completes a command, complete, immediate, final. His body lowered, his ears came forward, his amber eyes remained locked on Claire's face. And then, remarkably, he turned his head toward the girl on the gurney and then back to Claire. And it was so close to a deliberate introduction that 2 of the nurses took an involuntary step back. "Okay," Claire said softly to the dog. I've got her. That Kodiak watched her for 1 more second. Then he moved aside. The trauma team erupted into motion. Nobody said anything to Claire directly. They moved around her with her, the machinery of emergency medicine clicking back into gear vitals, being called orders, being placed, lines going in. But Holt, as he moved to the patient's head to assess her airway, looked at Claire over the top of the oxygen mask with an expression that was not quite anger and not quite something else, and it lived in the space between the two for a long moment before he looked away. The girl's name was Emma. Claire learned that from the handler's paperwork, not from anyone on the team because the team had not been told yet. Emma Calloway, age 19, secondary address listed as Joint Base Lewis McChord. Father's name, Commander David Calloway, United States Navy SEALs. Father's current location unknown. Claire absorbed this information with the same stillness she absorbed everything. She changed an IV bag, checked a pressure reading, wrote in a chart. Kodiak had positioned himself in the corner of the trauma bay, not directly underfoot, not in anyone's way, but present, always present. His eyes moved between Emma and Claire in a rotation that never varied. "Doctor." Holt called for a CT of the head and chest. "Her pupils are unequal," Claire said. "I can see that. The right is blown. That's not just concussion-level pressure." "Thank you, Ms. Mercer. If we wait for CT, we may not have time to act on what it shows." Holt looked up from his assessment, and this time his expression had settled into something cleaner, something colder. "Are you suggesting I skip standard diagnostic protocol?" "I'm suggesting the diagnostic protocol exists to inform a decision you may need to make in the next 8 minutes, and the information you need to make that decision is already in front of you. Based on what your observation? Based on a blown pupil, a GCS of 6 ABP that has dropped another 12 points since she came through those doors in a respiratory pattern that has been Cheney-Stokes for the last 90 seconds. Well, Claire's voice was even, completely even. "She has a brain herniation in progress. That's not an opinion. That's what the data says." The room had gone quiet again. That particular quiet that happens when someone says something so specific, so precisely correct, that the air itself seems to hold still, waiting to find out if they are right. Holt stared at Claire. Claire looked back at him. From the corner, Kodiak made a sound, not a bark, not a growl. Something between the two. Low and urgent, and every head in the room turned toward Emma, and the monitor above her bed showed exactly what Claire had known it would show. "Get neurosurgery on the phone," Holt said. Now, he said it to Donna, but his eyes were still on Claire. "Already paged," Claire said, and turned back to the IV line. The next 20 minutes were controlled fury. Claire moved through it with the same economy of motion she brought to everything. No wasted steps, no hesitation, no second guessing. She anticipated orders before they were given, positioned herself exactly where she needed to be in the precise moment she was needed there. Nurses who had been cool toward her in her 3 weeks at St. Augustine found themselves deferring to her instincts without knowing why, asking her questions they would normally have asked Holt. At one point, Marcus Webb, the ER's senior resident, a young man of 29, who had the good sense to recognize competence when he saw it, handed her a syringe and said quietly, "You've done this before." It was not a question. "Everyone's done trauma," Claire said. "Not like this," Marcus said. She didn't answer that. The neurosurgeon arrived, Dr. Patricia Osei, a compact, sharp-eyed woman who took one look at Emma and said, "Or 3 now," and then looked at the room and said, "Which one of you caught the herniation?" A beat of silence. "She did," Marcus said and nodded toward Claire. Osei looked at her. "Good catch. She needs hypertonic saline and hyperventilation in transport," Claire said. "She's already been losing ground for—" "I know what she needs," Osei said, but not unkindly. "Come with me to the OR doors." Claire followed. As she moved, she was aware of Kodiak falling into step behind her. Not with the team, not with the gurney, but behind her specifically. Following her the way he would have followed someone he knew, someone he trusted. She was aware of Holt watching this from across the trauma bay. She was aware of the handler watching it too. She did not look at either of them. At the OR corridor doors, Claire stopped. The doors were restricted. She couldn't go further. Emma's gurney went through Dr. Osei at the head, the surgical team assembling around it. Claire stood at the threshold and watched until the door swung shut and the beeping of the monitors faded. Kodiak sat beside her. She reached down without thinking and placed her hand on the top of his head. He pressed into her palm. "She's going to be okay," Claire said quietly. To the dog, to herself, to whoever was listening. "She's going to be okay." She straightened, turned, and walked back toward the main trauma bay. And that was when she saw him. He was standing at the nurse's station in a dark suit that had the particular cut of government-issue functional, unremarkable design not to be remembered. He was holding a credentials wallet open with one hand, and Donna was looking at it with an expression Claire had never seen on Donna Reyes' face before. Donna, who had worked at this ER for 22 years, who had seen federal agents and police detectives and military liaisons come through those doors and had greeted every single one of them with the same steady, unimpressed gaze. Donna looked scared. The man in the suit was talking quietly, and then he looked up and his eyes found Claire across the length of the trauma bay with the particular precision of someone who had known exactly where she would be before he walked through those doors. Claire stopped walking. Her hand was still warm from Kodiak's fur. The man closed his credentials wallet. He said something to Donna that made Donna step back from the counter, and then he started walking toward Claire. Kodiak stood up. Claire said quietly to the dog, "Easy." Kodiak was not easy, but he stayed at her side. The man stopped 6 feet away. Up close, he was younger than he had seen from across the room, 35, maybe 36. Close-cropped hair, a face that held its expression carefully. He looked at her for a long moment before he spoke. "Clare Mercer," he said. "Yes," she said. "Is that your current name?" The trauma bay was busy. People were moving, charts were being written, phones were ringing. All of the ordinary sounds of an emergency room at midnight. But inside that 6 feet of space between Claire and this man, everything was completely still. She looked at him steadily. "I'm sorry, who are you?" He opened the credentials wallet again and held it up. She looked at it. She took her time reading it. When she looked up, her face showed nothing. "That's a long way to come for a nurse," she said. "It's a long way to come for the woman we're looking at," he said. "But we're not here for you, not yet." He glanced toward the OR corridor doors. "We're here for her, and we need to talk about what you know about the situation that brought her here." "I know she had a traumatic brain injury and a brain herniation in progress," Claire said. "That's what I know." "That's not all she had," the man said. He leaned slightly forward and lowered his voice. "Miss Mercer, she had a tracking device implanted in her left shoulder. We found it on the CT, and whoever put it there, they knew her father's operation, the current one, the classified one." Claire was very still. "And the dog," the man continued, and now his eyes dropped briefly to Kodiak, who was watching him with unblinking attention. "The dog responded to you, to a command that is not in any public database, not in any civilian training registry." He paused. "Kodiak is assigned to a unit that does not officially exist. The command you used is known to 11 people in the world." The number hit Claire like a physical thing. She kept her face still. "You might want to tell me," the man said quietly, "who you are." The real answer. "Because Commander Calloway is 40 minutes out, and when he walks through those doors, the first thing he is going to do is look for the person who saved his daughter's life. And then he is going to recognize you. And when that happens," he paused, "I'd rather you had already had this conversation with me." Claire looked at him for a long moment. From somewhere in the hospital, a monitor beeped. A phone rang. Someone laughed quickly in a distant hallway. Kodiak pressed against her leg. "You've got the wrong person," Claire said. The man looked at her. He looked at the dog pressed against her leg. He looked at her hands, which were completely steady, completely still in a way that most people's hands simply are not when a federal agent tells them they are connected to a classified military operation. "Ghostbird," he said softly. It was the first time she had heard that name in 4 years. She felt it move through her like electricity, not quite pain, not quite recognition. Something older than both. Her face showed nothing. "I want a lawyer," Claire said before I say another word. The man nodded slowly. "That's a very specific response for someone who claims to be just a nurse. It's a very specific question for someone talking to someone they claim they have no interest in." They looked at each other. Kodiak pressed harder against her leg. Down the hall, the OR doors were still closed. Emma Calloway was still in surgery. Outside the hospital in a car Claire could not see but somehow knew was there a man who had once known her by a different name was 40 minutes away. And in the quiet center of all of it, Clare Mercer, who had chosen this name and this city and this ordinary anonymous life, with the particular care of someone who understands that anonymity is its own kind of armor, stood completely still and waited and calculated and began in the deep practiced silence of her mind to prepare for what was coming. The federal agent's name was Garrett Voss, and he did not look like a man who was used to being told no. He stood there for exactly 3 seconds after Claire said the word lawyer, and in those 3 seconds something shifted in his expression, not anger, not surprise, something more calculated than both. He closed the credentials wallet, he put it back in his jacket pocket, and then he smiled, and the smile was the most unsettling thing he had done yet. "You're not under arrest," he said pleasantly. "You don't need a lawyer, I'm just having a conversation." "Then I'm ending the conversation," Claire said. She turned and walked back toward the trauma bay. He let her go. That was the part that bothered her more than anything else, that he let her go. Because men like Garrett Voss did not disengage. They repositioned. And she could feel him repositioning now somewhere behind her, finding a new angle, a new approach, the way water finds a new way through rock when the first path closes. Donna caught her at the nurse's station. Her voice was low and tightly controlled, the voice of a woman who had survived 2 decades of hospital politics by learning exactly when to be quiet and exactly when to grab someone by the arm. She grabbed Claire by the arm. "Who is he?" Donna said. "I don't know," Claire said. "He showed me a badge that had 3 letters on it and a seal I did not recognize, and he asked me for your personal file." Claire looked at her. "Did you give it to him?" "I told him we don't release personnel files without a signed judicial order." Donna's jaw was tight. "He said he'd have one within the hour." Claire nodded slowly. An hour. She had an hour before her address, her social security number, her employment history, all of it carefully constructed, all of it real enough to survive a standard background check, but not real enough to survive the kind of deep file access a 3-letter agency could authorize before all of it was sitting on Garrett Voss's phone screen. 40 minutes until Commander Calloway walked through those doors. Less than an hour before Voss had everything. "Claire," Donna's grip tightened slightly. "I need you to tell me if I should be worried." Claire looked at her, at the lines around Donna's eyes, at the worry that lived there, genuine and unguarded. She thought about what the honest answer to that question would cost both of them. "No," she said. "You're fine, I'm handling it." She said it with the same quiet certainty. She said everything. And Donna believed her because Donna had learned in 3 weeks that when Clare Mercer said a thing with that particular quality of calm, it had always, without exception, turned out to be true. Claire turned to the board. She checked the clock on the wall. 11 minutes had passed since Emma went into surgery. Minimum surgical time for a craniotomy was 90 minutes. That gave her a window. Marcus Webb appeared at her elbow. He had that expression he sometimes got, eager, uncertain, hovering in the space between asking a question and pretending he hadn't wanted to ask it. He was a good resident, sharp, the kind of sharp that would either make him exceptional or get him into serious trouble, depending entirely on whether he learned when to push and when to stay still. "The agent," Marcus said quietly. "He's been asking about you." "I know." He talked to Chen from radiology and to one of the paramedics who brought Emma in. He paused. "He asked them if you had said anything unusual, any specific terminology." Claire kept her eyes on the board. "And what did they say?" "Chen said you called the herniation before the CT confirmed it. He said you named the exact pressure gradient you expected to find, and you were right to within 2 points." Another pause. "That's not normal nurse knowledge, Claire." "It's medical knowledge," Claire said. "That's not what Marcus." She turned to look at him, and her eyes were steady and direct and left no room for the conversation he was trying to have. "Emma Calloway is in surgery right now because someone in this room caught what was happening to her before it was too late. That is the only thing that matters tonight. Everything else is noise." He looked at her for a long moment. "Okay," he said finally. "Okay," and then quieter. "For what it's worth, what you did with the dog. I've never seen anything like that." She didn't answer that. From his position in the corner, Kodiak had not moved. He was watching the OR corridor doors with the focused patience of an animal that understood waiting in a way most humans never learn. His ears moved occasionally, tracking sounds, cataloging them, filing them away, but his body was still. He was holding a vigil. Claire understood that. She had held vigils before. 44 minutes. That was how long Emma had been on the table when Holt found Claire at the medication station. He didn't grab her wrist this time. He stopped 2 feet away, which was the closest he had been to an apology she was likely to get from him, and he stood there with his arms crossed and his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't particularly want to swallow. "The agent," Holt said finally. "Yes," Claire said. "He came to me. He asked about your credentials." He stopped. "I told him your credentials are in order and your performance since joining this team has been without issue." Claire looked at him. That surprised her. She let it show slightly because Holt was the kind of man who responded better to genuine surprise than to flattery. "Why do she said. "Because whatever else is happening here, you caught something tonight that I missed." The words seemed to cost him something. His jaw worked again. "I've been running trauma for 19 years. I did not catch the herniation. You did. And that girl is in surgery right now instead of..." He stopped. "I don't like being wrong," he said. but I like dead patients a great deal less. Claire nodded. I'm not your enemy, Holt said, and it sounded like he meant it and was irritated by the fact that he meant it. I know, Claire said. What does he want? Holt jerked his chin toward where Voss was still visible, now talking to someone near the ambulance bay entrance. I don't know yet, Claire said. It was close enough to the truth. 51 minutes into surgery, one of the OR nurses came through the corridor doors with an update. Emma was stable on the table. The bleed had been located. Dr. Osei was confident. Claire absorbed this without expression, and then when the OR nurse had gone back through, she pressed her palm flat against the nurse's station counter and let herself breathe for exactly 4 seconds. Kodiak looked up at her. She's okay, Claire told him quietly. His tail moved once, just once. And that was when the ambulance bay doors opened again and the room changed. It changed the way a room changes when someone walks in who carries a particular kind of weight, not loudness, not drama, but gravity. The specific gravity of someone who has spent years operating in environments where a wrong decision did not just cost points or positions or careers, where it cost lives and they carried every single one. Commander David Calloway was not in uniform. He was in jeans and a gray shirt sleeves pushed to the elbows, and he looked like a man who had driven very fast from somewhere very far away. He was 46 years old, solidly built with close-cropped dark hair going silver at the temples, and a face that had learned through long practice to show only what he intended it to show. Right now it was showing nothing, which meant he was terrified. Claire recognized that. She recognized it because she had worn that same face in that same way for the same reasons. He crossed the trauma bay floor in long strides, and Donna met him halfway, already holding her hands up in the universal gesture of, "We have news, and it is not the worst news." "Your daughter is in surgery," Donna said. "She's stable on the table. The surgical team expects to have her out within the next 40 minutes. She's going to, who caught it?" Calloway said. Donna blinked. "I'm sorry. The herniation, the agent briefed me on the way here. Her brain was herniating and someone in this ER caught it before it went critical." His voice was completely level. "Who caught it?" Donna turned almost involuntarily and looked at Claire. Calloway turned. He looked at Claire. Claire stood at the nurse's station, 12 feet away, and looked back at him and watched the exact moment he saw her. The exact moment recognition traveled through him like a current visible, even from 12 feet, even through the expression he was trying so hard to hold still. His mouth opened, closed. He took one step forward. Kodiak was on his feet before the step was complete. The dog moved across the room in a fast, low line and reached Calloway and pressed against his legs, and Calloway reached down without looking and put his hand on the dog's head, and it was such an automatic gesture, so deeply practiced, that it told Claire everything she needed to know about how long these two had worked together. Calloway straightened. He was looking at her. "Bravo 7-9er," he said. "It was not a question, it was a code. And it was a code that, as Garrett Voss had said, was known to 11 people in the world. It was a code that meant, I know who you are. I know your real name. And I am asking you right now to confirm that I am not losing my mind." Claire held his gaze for a long, steady beat. "You should see your daughter," she said. "Ghostbird," Calloway said, and his voice cracked slightly on the word, just slightly, and a man who had not spent years learning to read people would have missed it entirely. Claire did not miss it. The trauma bay was moving around them, people charting phones, ringing 2 new patients coming through from a car accident on Route 9, all of it continuing, indifferent the ER's relentless metabolism. But inside the bubble of those 12 feet, time had done something strange. "You need to go be with Emma," Claire said quietly. "That's the only thing right now." "How long?" Calloway said. He meant, how long have you been here? How long have you been hiding in this city, in this hospital, in this name? "Go be with your daughter," Claire said for the 3rd time. He looked at her for another moment. Then something in his face shifted the father, overtaking everything else the way it always did when the choice was clear enough. He nodded once. He followed Donna toward the OR family waiting area. Kodiak hesitated. He looked at Calloway. He looked at Claire. He looked at the OR doors. "Go," Claire said softly. The dog went. Claire turned back to the nurse's station and picked up a chart and stared at it for approximately 5 seconds without reading a single word on the page. Then Garrett Voss was beside her. He had moved quietly. She gave him that. Bravo 7-9er, he said in a tone of mild academic interest, as if he were noting a bird call he had not expected to hear in this particular county. That's a Tier 1 authentication protocol, the kind they use in units that don't appear in any congressional record. He paused. I only caught the last part, but I caught enough. Claire set the chart down. You've been watching this room, she said. I've been doing my yamba, he said, which right now involves understanding how a nurse in a civilian trauma center knows a protocol code tied to a black budget operation and why a military K-9 from that same operation treats her like she's his handler. He leaned slightly on the counter. You want to keep telling me you're just a nurse? I want you to tell me who sent you, Claire said. He looked at her with something that might in different circumstances have been respect. That's a more interesting question than denial, he said. Most people in your position would still be claiming they had no idea what I was talking about. Most people in my position, Claire said, have never been in my position. The two-way radio at the ambulance bay desk crackled. A dispatcher's voice broke through, and the words were ordinary. A new call, a new inbound, the ER's endless rotation. But Claire heard something in the background of the transmission that made her stop. It was brief. Half a second, maybe less. A sound that should not have been on a hospital radio frequency. A pattern she recognized from a different kind of communication, from a different kind of life, from a room full of encrypted signals and mission coordinates and voices that existed only inside secured channels. Someone was listening to this hospital, not monitoring, listening, actively, right now. She kept her face completely still. The device in Emma's shoulder, Claire said quietly. Voss looked at her sharply. The tracking device you said you found on CT, Claire continued, her voice low and steady and utterly controlled. Is it still transmitting? The question landed on Voss like a stone dropped into still water, and she watched the ripples move across his face, surprise and calculation, then something that looked very much like alarm. It should have been deactivated when we identified it, he said carefully. Should have been, Claire said. It was flagged for deactivation. Flagged is not the same as done. Voss pulled out his phone. His fingers moved fast. He brought it to his ear. Claire turned away from him and moved quickly toward the OR corridor doors. She pushed through them before anyone could stop her, technically beyond her clearance. Technically a violation of half a dozen protocols, but she had spent 4 years in a life where protocol was a framework and survival was the actual rule. The OR nurse at the prep desk looked up in alarm. Ma'am, you can't be. The patient in OR 3, Claire said. Emma McCalloway. Is she still open on the table? She's in final closure. Who has access to her surgical site right now? Who is physically in that room? Dr. Osei, 2 residents, the anesthesiologist, 2 scrub. Has anyone entered that room in the last 20 minutes who was not on the original surgical team? The nurse stared at her. What? Think, Claire said, and her voice had dropped into a register that was not a nurse's voice, that was not any kind of civilian voice, and the nurse heard it and went still with the instinctive recognition of someone who has just realized they are talking to a person of an entirely different category than they assume. Has anyone gone in or out of OR 3 who was not supposed to be there? The nurse turned to her access log. Her finger ran down the screen, and then it stopped. There was a device tech, she said slowly. He came in about 30 minutes ago. Said he was there to check the monitoring equipment. He had a badge. What did he look like? The nurse described him. Claire turned and walked fast back through the corridor doors, and she was already moving when she came back into the trauma bay, already scanning the room, already calculating. Voss was still on his phone. He looked up when he saw her face. The device is still active, he said. I know, Claire said. And someone was in that OR who shouldn't have been. Voss went very still. Emma is still in there, Claire said. She is still on the table, and whoever put that device in her shoulder now knows exactly where she is. For 1/2 second, the two of them looked at each other across the space of everything they hadn't said, everything they hadn't admitted, every layer of history and cover and silence that sat between them. Then Voss moved. He was already on his radio, already speaking in short clipped sentences, already summoning whatever resources he had positioned around this building. Claire moved with him, not because he had asked her to, not because she was following his lead, but because she had already mapped this building in her first week. The exits, the service corridors, the loading bays, the stairwells, the way she mapped every building she had ever operated inside. Old habit, the kind that never actually stopped being necessary. "There's a service exit on the north side of the building," she said, pulling level with Voss as they moved, past the linen storage. "If someone is trying to move from that OR to an extraction point, that's the fastest route out." Voss glanced at her. "How do you know this building like that?" "I know every building like that," Claire said. He didn't ask the follow-up question. They came around the corner of the corridor, and Claire stopped. She stopped because the man coming from the opposite direction stopped too, and for a fraction of a second they looked at each other, and Claire registered everything about him in the way she had been trained: height, build, hands, where his weight was distributed, what his right hand was doing near the right side of his jacket, and she knew with the cold clarity of someone who had spent 4 years trying to forget that she had this particular skill, that he was not a device tech. He had a badge. It was very good. It would have fooled anyone who wasn't looking for it to be wrong. Claire was looking. "Stop," Voss said, reaching for his own credentials. The man turned and ran. Claire was faster. She moved without thinking. Thinking was too slow for this. Thinking was the thing you did before and after, not during, and she cut the angle on him through the corridor intersection, and she was closer than he expected when he looked back, which was the mistake that cost him the half second he needed. And when Voss came through the door 30 seconds later with 2 hospital security guards, Claire had him against the wall with his right arm locked and his right hand, which had been moving toward his jacket, held well away from his body. She was breathing hard, not from exertion, from the effort of being, for the first time in 4 years, exactly who she actually was. Voss looked at the man. He looked at Claire. "That," he said, almost to himself, "is not a nurse." Claire released the man's arm to the security guards. She stepped back. She straightened her scrubs. She pushed a strand of hair out of her face. "No," she said quietly. "It's not." Down the hall, the OR door opened, and Dr. Ossi's voice carried through. "She's out. She's in recovery. She did great." Claire closed her eyes for exactly 1 second. Then she opened them and turned to face Garrett Voss and Commander David Calloway, who had appeared in the corridor doorway behind him, Kodiak pressed against his leg, both of them looking at her with the particular expression of people who have just seen a thing they already knew and are now simply waiting for the rest of it to finally be spoken out loud. "All right," Claire said. She said it quietly. She said it the way someone says a word after a long silence, when the silence has finally cost more than the word. "All right." The word hung in the corridor like smoke. "All right." Calloway was the first to move. He crossed the distance between them in 4 steps and stopped close enough that she could see the exact shade of exhaustion in his eyes, the deep structural kind, the kind that didn't come from one bad night, but from years of carrying things that had no proper place to be set down. "How long?" he said. Same question as before, but this time he was not going to accept redirection. 4 years, Claire said. Something moved through his face, not surprise. Something older than surprise. "We thought you were dead." "I know," she said. "Claire." He said the name like it didn't fit right in his mouth, like he was still adjusting to the shape of it. "Your real name is Clare Mercer," she said, quietly but completely clearly. "That's who I am now." Calloway looked at her for a long moment. Then he looked at Voss. Then he looked back at her, and she could see him doing the thing that commanders do, sorting information into columns, running probabilities, deciding which question was the most critical one to ask first. "The man you just put against the wall," he said. "He was in Emma's OR." "I know. Voss told me." His jaw tightened. "Was he there to finish the job or extract information? I don't know yet, but the device in her shoulder was still transmitting, which means whoever sent him knew her exact location in real time." She paused. "Which means they were willing to act inside a hospital in an active OR, which tells you something about the level of authorization they were operating under." Calloway turned to Voss. "Who is he?" Voss had been on his phone almost continuously for the past 4 minutes. He lowered it now. "No ID, no prints on record in any domestic database. We're running international now." He looked at Claire. "You got to look at him, anything." Claire thought about the half second she had seen his face, the way he'd moved, the micro decisions his body had made in the corridor angle of approach, weight distribution, the specific way he'd tracked Voss's hand rather than his face when Voss reached for his badge. Eastern European training, she said. The way he pivoted when he ran, that's a specific footwork pattern. Not American, not British. Somewhere that still trains the old Soviet close quarters doctrine. She paused. He's not a contractor. He's too clean. Someone state adjacent is running him. Voss stared at her. You got all of that in 30 seconds. I got all of that in about 4, Claire said. Calloway made a sound that was not quite a laugh and not quite anything else. There she is, he said very quietly, as if he were saying it to himself and not to anyone in the corridor. Claire did not respond to that. A hospital security guard appeared at the corridor junction and caught Voss's eye. Sir, we've got him secured in the admin office. Local PD is 3 minutes out. Tell them to wait outside, Voss said immediately. I need him before local law enforcement muddies the chain of custody. The guard nodded and disappeared. Calloway put his hand on Claire's arm. Not like Holt had, not with force, not with ownership. With the particular touch of someone who needs to make sure the other person is actually still there, actually still real. I need 5 minutes, he said. Just 5 minutes, Claire, before Voss goes in that room, before any of this goes further. He looked at her steadily. Please. She looked at his hand on her arm. She looked at his face. She thought about the 4 years she had spent building the distance that this 5 minutes would collapse. 5 minutes, she said. Voss understood. He moved away without being asked, which elevated him slightly in Claire's estimation, because most men in his position would have pushed. They found an empty family consultation room off the main corridor, the kind of room that held hard conversations, that had a box of tissues on the table and chairs, that faced each other at the precise angle designed to facilitate difficult things. Calloway sat. Claire remained standing, which was its own kind of statement, and he accepted it. The operation, he said, Iron Veil. Claire's stillness became a different kind of stillness. You know what happened, he said. It was not a question. I know what I was told happened, she said carefully. And what were you told? That the extraction failed, that the asset was lost, that the team that went in for the second pull was compromised before they hit the ground. She paused. And that the source of the compromise was internal. Calloway nodded slowly. That's what the official report said. But, Claire said, because there was very clearly a but. But the official report was written by the same office that authorized the mission, Calloway said. And 3 months ago, we started finding pieces that didn't fit. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, hands locked together. Someone is trying to reconstruct what actually happened during Iron Veil. Not to expose it, to use it. There are assets that were moved during that operation, people, materials, information that were never officially logged. Because they couldn't be. And whoever is doing this believes that the only person alive who knows where all of those pieces ended up. He stopped. Claire's voice was absolutely flat when she said it. Is me. Is you, Calloway confirmed. The room held that for a moment. That's why Emma, Claire said. We think so. She didn't know anything. She was never in any classified space. But she is my daughter, and the people who have been looking for you know that I know where you are. His voice tightened on something. They used her to draw me out. And when I moved, they assumed you'd surface. They were right, Claire said. Yes, Calloway said. They were. She moved then 2 steps toward the window, 2 steps back, a rare physical manifestation of the things she usually kept so completely interior. Then she stopped. The device in Emma's shoulder. How long had it been there? We estimate 6 weeks based on the tissue integration. 6 weeks. Claire did the math in her head without meaning to. 6 weeks ago, she had been at this hospital. 6 weeks ago, she had been exactly where she was right now in this life, in this name. They already knew where I was 6 weeks ago. Possibly, or they were building insurance in case they found you later. Calloway paused. Claire, what happened on Iron Veil? What really happened? Because the record has a hole in it about 16 hours wide, and everything we've been able to reconstruct since then points to that window. She looked at him. 16 hours. She could have told him what happened in those 16 hours in about 45 seconds. She had replayed them so many times in so many sleepless hours in this quiet life she had built that they lived in her with the terrible clarity of things that refused to become the past. That's not a 5-minute conversation, she said. I know, he said, but it's the conversation we have to have. Before she could answer, her pager went off. She looked at it, or recovery. Emma was awake. Calloway was on his feet before Claire had lowered the pager. She put a hand on his chest, not stopping him, just steadying him. "Let me go first," she said. "She doesn't know you're here yet. Let her wake up in a room without," she searched for the word, "without all of this in it. Give her 2 minutes." He wanted to say no, she could see it. The father in him was pressing hard against every other instinct. But the commander in him, the part that had survived by knowing when someone else's judgment was the right one to trust, went out. He nodded. 2 minutes. Recovery was quieter than the trauma bay. Emma Calloway lay in the bed with the particular fragile stillness of someone who has just come through something large and is not fully aware yet of how large it was. Her color was better. Her breathing was even. The monitor above her head was drawing a steady, reassuring line. Claire sat in the chair beside the bed. Emma's eyes opened. They focused slowly, the way eyes do after anesthesia, finding the ceiling first, then the walls, then the face nearest to them. They found Claire. "Hey," Claire said quietly. Emma looked at her for a long moment. Her voice when it came was hoarse and small. "The dog. Kodiak is fine. He's with your dad." Emma's eyes sharpened slightly. "My dad is here. He's right outside. He didn't," she stopped, swallowed. "He wasn't supposed to know where I was. I was supposed to be," she stopped again. Claire leaned forward slightly. "Emma, you don't have to explain anything right now." "Is he?" Emma's hand moved toward the IV line, the restless movement of someone trying to sit up before their body is ready. "Is he okay? Is he?" "He's okay," Claire said and put her hand over Emma's to still that. "He's fine. He got here fast." Emma's eyes filled. She didn't let the tears fall. She pressed her lips together and blinked and pushed it back down, and Claire recognized that too. Recognized it the way you recognize a skill someone else taught themselves, the same way you taught yourself. "He's going to be so angry," Emma whispered. "He's going to be so relieved he won't have room for angry," Claire said. A pause, then Emma looked at her more carefully. "You were there when I came in. I don't really remember it, but I remember a voice. And I remember Kodiak stopped." She frowned slightly. "Kodiak doesn't stop for anyone." "He stopped tonight," Claire said. Claire looked at her. She thought about how to answer that. She thought about the version of the answer that was simple and the version that was true and how much distance existed between those two things. "Old friend," she said. Emma studied her face with a particular focus of someone operating on limited information and good instincts. Then she said slowly, like she was testing the weight of it, "Who are you?" Actually, before Claire could answer, the recovery room door opened, and Calloway came through it, and the expression on his face when he saw his daughter awake, breathing, looking back at him, that expression was not the face of a commander or a SEAL or a man who had spent his career learning to show nothing. It was just a father, raw and undisguised and momentarily unable to be anything else. Emma made a sound, something small and broken. "Dad!" Claire stood and moved back to give them space. She stood against the wall and watched David Calloway sit on the edge of his daughter's bed and take her hand in both of his. And she watched Emma's composed expression dissolve entirely, and she felt something in her own chest respond to it, something she had spent 4 years insulating herself from, packing away, rerouting around. She turned and walked out of the recovery room. In the corridor, Voss was waiting. "He talked to you," Voss said, "in the consult room." "Yes." "He told you about Iron Veil." It was not a question. She looked at him. "You're monitoring this hospital," she said. "I'm monitoring him," Voss said without apology. "Calloway has been on a watch list for 3 months. Not because we think he's compromised, because we think people are watching him, and if they are any conversation he has—" "You were listening to us," Claire said flatly. "I was protecting the integrity of—" "Don't," Claire said, and the word was quiet and final in a way that stopped him mid-sentence. "Don't dress it up. You were listening, that's fine. I'm not angry about it. I am going to need you to be straight with me about what you actually know and what you're actually looking for, or this conversation is going to cost us all more time than we have." Voss looked at her for a long moment. Then something shifted in him. A posture change, subtle, that moved him from the stance of someone managing a situation to the stance of someone actually engaging with it. "Iron Veil," he said. The 16-hour window. We've had 3 analysts on it for 8 weeks. We can account for approximately 9 of those hours from satellite signals and survivor debriefs. He paused. The other 7 hours are completely black. No signals, no imagery, no documentation. Whoever cleaned that window did it surgically and completely. What do you think happened in those 7 hours? Claire said. I think an asset was moved, Voss said. Not a person. Something that could be used as leverage at a level that would require the kind of resources we're seeing deployed right now: foreign state-adjacent operatives, compromised hospital staff, a tracking device sophisticated enough that our own sensors almost missed it. He looked at her directly. I think you moved it. And I think you're the only living person who knows where it ended up. Claire said nothing. I'm not here to prosecute you, Voss said. I need to be clear about that. Whatever happened in those 7 hours, whatever decisions were made, the office I work for is not looking to build a case. We're looking to prevent something. Because whatever was moved during Iron Veil, someone wants it back badly enough to put a tracking device in a 19-year-old girl's shoulder. He paused. Badly enough to send an operative into an active OR to finish the job when the first approach failed. The corridor was quiet around them. Somewhere in the building, ordinary hospital sounds continued, a phone ringing, a cart being wheeled, someone laughing at a nurse's station on the floor above. The world's indifference to any given catastrophe as reliable as gravity. The man you have in the admin office, Claire said, he's not going to talk. No. And then when he doesn't talk, whoever sent him will know the approach failed, which means they move to the contingency. She said the next sentence very carefully. Which means they already know Emma is out of surgery and in recovery, and the room she's in, because the device is still transmitting. Voss pulled out his phone. We're deactivating it now. Don't, Claire said. He stopped. What? If you deactivate it now, they know we found it. They go dark, they change everything, you lose any trace of the network. She looked at him steadily. Leave it active. Move Emma to a different room, make the move visible enough to register on their monitoring. Then put a signal ghost in the room she just left. Let them think she's still there. Give yourself a window to work backward from the transmission to the receiver location. Voss stared at her. He stopped. That's exactly the right play. I know, Claire said. You've run signal ghosts before. I've run a lot of things before, Claire said. He looked at her with the particular expression of a man who is rapidly and forcibly updating his understanding of who he is talking to. We need you, he said, officially. Whatever form that takes, I can have authorization within the hour. But we need what you know about those 7 hours, and we need someone who can help us trace this network before they regroup. Claire thought about her apartment, the particular silence of it at 7 in the morning when she made coffee before her shift. The way the nurses at the station had started saving her the chair nearest the window. The rhythm she had built quiet and careful over 4 years. She thought about Emma Calloway's hand and her father's hand in the recovery room. She thought about a tracking device implanted in a 19-year-old girl who had never been in a classified space in her life. There's a man, Claire said. He'll be using a communications node somewhere within a 2-mile radius of this hospital. You don't run an active intercept in this close to the target without a local relay. Your signals team needs to be looking for a burst transmission pattern on a frequency between 1.8 and 2.1 gigahertz. It'll look like background noise. It's not. Voss had his phone up and was typing before she finished the sentence. And Voss, Claire said. He looked up. When you move Emma, she said, make sure Calloway goes with her. Visibly. Anyone watching from outside needs to see him move with her. If they have a secondary operative in position, and they might, Calloway is the secondary target. Not Emma. She paused. She was never really the target. She was the signal. Voss was very still. The signal for what? To see if Calloway would lead them to me, Claire said. And he did. Something heavy settled in the corridor between them. So they already know you're here, Voss said. They've known for 6 weeks, Claire said. The device in Emma's shoulder wasn't about finding me. It was about waiting until I had no choice but to be exactly who I am. She looked at the recovery room door. And it worked. She said it without bitterness, without self-pity, just a clean, clear acknowledgement of a well-executed play by the other side. She had been maneuvered. She recognized it. And she was already past it, already thinking 3 moves forward, because that was what she had been trained to do. And that was regardless of 4 years in scrubs in a civilian trauma center, what she still was. I need access to everything you have on Iron Veil, she said. The official record and whatever your analysts have reconstructed. I need a secure room in this building, not my hospital, not anyone's office, somewhere clean. And I need Calloway in the room. Done, Voss said. And I need something else, Claire said. What? I need you to understand something clearly before we go any further. She looked at him with complete directness. Whatever I tell you about those 7 hours, whatever decisions I made, whatever I moved, whatever I did in the dark, in a window that someone very powerful did not want on any record, I made those decisions to protect people, not assets, not operations. People. She paused. And I will not apologize for them. Not to you, not to your office, not to anyone. Voss held her gaze. Then he nodded once. Understood. Good, Claire said. She turned toward the recovery room to tell Calloway they needed to move. And that was when Marcus Webb came around the corner of the corridor at a near run, his face carrying an expression she had never seen on him before. Open alarm unmanaged the expression of someone who has just found out that the ground they were standing on is not what they thought it was. Claire, he said and stopped in front of her, breathing fast. There's a woman at the front desk. She's been there for about 10 minutes. She told Donna she was here for a patient consult. He swallowed. But she asked for you specifically. Not by your name. He looked at her with wide eyes. She asked for Ghostbird. Claire did not move. Voss turned sharply. What did she look like? Marcus described her. Claire felt something cold move through her. Not fear, something beneath fear. The recognition of a specific name, a specific face, a specific voice that she had not heard in 4 years and had hoped with everything in her never to hear again. Because the person Marcus had just described was not an enemy. She was something considerably more complicated than that. She was the woman who had taught Claire everything she knew about disappearing. And she had just walked through the front doors of St. Augustine Trauma Center and asked for her by name. Claire's first instinct was to move toward the front desk. Her second instinct, the one that had kept her alive for a decade in places that didn't appear on any declassified map, was to stop, breathe, and think for exactly 3 seconds before she moved anywhere. She used those 3 seconds. Marcus, she said, her voice completely level, go back to the trauma bay. Stay with Donna. Don't tell anyone else what you just told me. Marcus opened his mouth. I mean it, Claire said. No one. Not Chen, not the security desk, nobody. Can you do that? He looked at her for one charged second. Then he nodded and went. Claire turned to Voss. Did your team clear the front entrance when you arrived? Standard sweep, Voss said. 40 minutes ago. Then she came in after your sweep, which means she was watching and she timed it. Claire was already moving down the corridor, not toward the front desk, but parallel to it toward the administrative wing that ran along the building's east side. She knew you were here. She knew your protocol. She waited for the window. Who is she? Voss said, keeping pace beside her. Claire thought about how to answer that. The woman's name was Sandra Reeve, except that it wasn't Sandra. Reeve was simply the name Claire knew her by, the name she had used during the 18 months they had worked in the same unit, and almost certainly not the name she had been born with. She was 51 years old. She had gray-green eyes that never seemed to fully warm, even when she was smiling, and she smiled often, and that specific combination of warmth and coldness was the most dangerous thing about her. She had been Claire's handler during Iron Veil. Her name is Sandra Reeve, Claire said, except it's probably not. She ran deep cover intelligence operations for 12 years before she transitioned to what was officially called an advisory capacity. She paused. She was the architect of Iron Veil. She designed the operation from the ground up. Voss went very still beside him. Sandra Reeve. I know that name. You should. Her file is about 40 pages long and almost entirely redacted. She was listed as inactive, Voss said. We flagged her file 3 weeks ago when we started pulling the Iron Veil reconstruction. Inactive, off the board, retired. She was never retired, Claire said. She was repositioned. There's a difference. She taught me that difference. She stopped at the corner of the administrative corridor. She's the one who taught me how to disappear. Voss absorbed this. And now she's at your front desk asking for you by your call sign. Yes. So either she's been sent to extract you or she's been sent to silence you. Claire had already run that calculation. Or neither, she said. Sandra Reeve does not run errands for other people. She never has. If she's here, it's because she decided to be here. She made a choice to come through that door, and she made a choice to use my call sign. She's telling me something. What? That she wants me to know it's her before I see her, Claire said. She's announcing herself. She's giving me a moment to prepare. That sounds like someone who doesn't want to be a threat, Voss said carefully. It sounds like someone who is very, very good at managing how she appears to people, Claire said, which is exactly what she is. She turned and looked at Voss directly. I need to talk to her alone. Absolutely not, Voss said. She will not say anything real with you in the room. She will perform for you. She'll give you enough to seem cooperative and hold everything important back, and you won't even know what you didn't get. Claire held his gaze. I know how she works. You don't. 5 minutes alone, then you come in. Voss was quiet for exactly 2 seconds. Then, I'll have eyes on the room. Fine, Claire said. She walked toward the front desk. Sandra Reeve was sitting in one of the waiting area chairs with her coat folded over her lap and her hands relaxed and open, and she looked as she always looked, like someone's well-traveled aunt who had recently returned from somewhere pleasant in Europe. Silver hair cut cleanly at her jaw. Good posture. The particular stillness of someone who has nothing to prove to any room she is in. She looked up when Claire came through the door, and she smiled. The way she always smiled, like she was genuinely glad to see you, and like that gladness existed in a room right next to a room you were not allowed to enter. Clare Mercer, she said. She said it the way Calloway had said it, like she was testing the fit of it. That's a good name, unassuming. The Mercer is a nice touch, very civilian. Sandra, Claire said, and sat down across from her, not beside her. Across where she could watch her hands and her face in the 17 small signals a person sends that they are almost never aware of sending. You look well, Sandra said. The work suits you. You always were better in a crisis than you were in the waiting. What are you doing here? Visiting, Sandra said pleasantly. Sandra. The pleasant expression did not change, but something behind it sharpened slightly, the way a light changes quality without changing brightness. I came to warn you, she said, and to explain some things, in that order. Warn me about what? The man your federal friend has in the admin office. She said it without any particular emphasis, the way you'd mention a detail you assumed everyone already knew. He is not the principal threat. He is a distraction. He was sent here specifically to be caught. Claire's jaw tightened. Say that again. He was meant to be caught, Sandra repeated. He's clean enough to draw attention, but not clean enough to hold up to proper scrutiny. He's a lure, Claire. He was placed there so that your Mr. Voss would focus his resources on identifying him and tracing his network while the actual operation completes on a different timeline entirely. The weight of it landed on Claire like something physical. She kept her body still. The actual operation. Iron Veil was never fully closed, Sandra said. It is some. You know that. The 7 hours that have been making people nervous, what was moved where it went, that was never the end of the thread. It was a pause. Someone very powerful decided to be patient, and patience is now running out. Who? Claire said. Sandra looked at her with the gray-green eyes that never quite warmed. That's what I came to tell you, and it's not someone you're going to want to hear. The waiting room around them was ordinary and indifferent. A couple in chairs on the far side, a man scrolling his phone near the window, the front desk staff doing front desk things. All of it continuing at its own pace, utterly unaware that the conversation happening in the corner of this room was connected to an operation that had cost 4 lives, burned 3 intelligence networks, and sent 1 woman running so far from her own name that she had buried it entirely. Tell me, Claire said. Sandra smoothed the coat on her lap. Once, a small gesture and the only tell Claire had ever been able to identify in her in 18 months of close proximity. General Warren Locke, Sandra said. Claire heard the name. She sat with it for 3 full seconds, turning it over, running it against every memory, every conversation, every briefing she had ever attended. Locke was Iron Veil's oversight authority, Claire said. Locke was Iron Veil's architect, Sandra said. I designed the operational structure. He designed the purpose. And the purpose was never what the brief said it was. What was the purpose? Extraction, Sandra said. Not of a person, of documentation. Specific documentation relating to a series of procurement decisions Locke made between 2016 and 2019 that would, if they became public in his career, and very likely result in criminal referral. She paused. I didn't know that going in. I designed an intelligence operation around a strategic objective I believe was legitimate. I was used, Claire, which is not something I enjoy saying. Claire looked at her, measuring, testing the feel of it against everything she knew about Sandra Reeve, about how she operated, about the distance between her words and her intentions. The documents, Claire said carefully, the ones Locke wanted extracted. Sandra looked back at her, steady, patient. And Claire felt it, the specific, cold, cellular level recognition of a truth that has been sitting inside you unnamed for 4 years. They weren't in the extraction site, Claire said. No, Sandra said. They were already out. Someone had already moved them. Yes, Sandra said. During the 7 hours, Claire said. Oh, yes. The corridor outside the waiting room was visible through the glass panel in the door. Claire could see Voss positioned down the hall watching. She could see the angle of his body trying to read what was happening inside the room, from the body language of two women who had both spent their careers making sure their body language told people exactly what they wanted it to tell. Sandra, Claire said, where are the documents now? And Sandra Reeve, who had designed 12 years of intelligence operations, who had built and burned covers across 4 continents, who had taught Clare Mercer everything she knew about the art of controlled disappearance. Sandra Reeve looked across the gap between them with those gray-green eyes. You already know, she said. The silence that followed lasted 4 seconds. Then Claire stood up. Come with me, she said. Sandra stood unruffled, folded her coat over her arm, and followed Claire through the door into the corridor where Voss was waiting. He saw their faces. He read them. We need the secure room now, Claire said, and we need Calloway. Voss was already on his phone. They moved through the hospital in a tight group, and Claire kept Sandra ahead of her. Not because she didn't trust her, but because 18 months working alongside Sandra Reeve had taught her that trust and verification were not opposites. They were partners, and you practiced them simultaneously at all times. They reached the conference room. Voss had secured a hospital administrative space plain and functional, cleared of staff. Calloway was already there. He had left Kodiak with Emma, and without the dog, he looked marginally less armored, marginally more like the man underneath the commander. He looked at Sandra when she walked in, and his expression moved through recognition, then wariness, then something that settled into a kind of controlled fury. You ran Iron Veil, he said. The operational structure, Sandra said, not the purpose. I've just finished explaining that distinction to Claire. Explain it to me, Calloway said, and his voice had the particular flatness of someone working very hard to keep heat out of it. Sandra did, concisely, clearly, without defense. Locke, the procurement records, the real objective behind the mission brief. She laid it out with the same clean economy she had always brought to briefings, no excess, no flourish, just the essential architecture of the thing. When she finished, the room was very quiet. Calloway looked at Claire. The 7 hours. Yes, Claire said. You found them. During the extraction, you found the documents. I found what Locke was actually looking for, Claire said, and I understood what they were, and I made a decision. You didn't bring them out, Calloway said. It was not an accusation. It was the shape of something he had suspected and was now confirming. No, Claire said, I didn't bring them out. She looked at him steadily. I couldn't give them to the extraction team. I didn't know at that point who on the team was loyal to the mission and who was loyal to Locke. And there was a difference. There was a significant difference as it turned out. The team that went in for the second poll, Voss said slowly, the one that was compromised. Locke's people were on that team, Claire said. I found out 3 days after the fact. By then I had already made other arrangements, and I understood that if I surfaced, there would be questions I could not answer without compromising those arrangements. So I didn't surface. You ran, Calloway said. Still not an accusation, but closer. I protected what I had, Claire said, and I protected the people who would have been at risk if Locke knew it existed. Voss had been listening to all of this with the expression of a man who is rapidly recalculating the scale of what he walked into. The documentation, he said, the procurement records. If what you're describing is accurate, if Locke used an active intelligence operation to try to recover evidence of his own misconduct. He stopped. He's the Deputy Director of Special Operations Command. I know what he is, Claire said. Claire, Voss's voice had shifted, become very precise. Where are the documents? She looked at Calloway, then at Sandra, then at Voss, and then she did something that nobody in the room expected. She pulled her phone from her scrub pocket, opened a browser, navigated to an unremarkable domain address. The kind that looks like a dead link, a broken page, digital debris, and entered a 17-character string from memory. She turned the phone to face Voss. On the screen was a portal. Behind the portal was a file archive. Behind the file archive were 4 years of patience compressed into documentation that was about to become the most dangerous thing in this building. Voss stared at it. That's a dead drop, he said. That's an insurance policy, Claire said. One that I have been maintaining for 4 years, that Locke has been trying to locate for 4 years, and that is the reason a 19-year-old girl has a tracking device in her shoulder. Voss looked up from the phone. His face had gone through several things in quick succession and was now completely still. This is what they want. This is what they want, Claire confirmed. Calloway said quietly, you've been sitting on this for 4 years. I've been protecting it, Claire said. There's a difference, Wesham. Sandra spoke from her chair. The reason I came tonight, the warning. She looked at each of them in turn. Locke knows she's here. He knew before tonight. The 6-week timeline on the device in your daughter's shoulder. She looked at Calloway. He wasn't waiting for an opportunity. He was waiting for a specific trigger. There's a Senate committee hearing in 11 days, a closed session. The subject is Special Operations Command procurement practices between 2016 and 2019. The room absorbed that. 11 days, Voss said. He needs the archive before that hearing, Sandra said. Not to destroy it, to control the narrative around it. There's a difference between documentation that surfaces on someone else's timeline and documentation that surfaces on yours. So the clock is 11 days, Calloway said. The clock, Sandra said, is considerably shorter than that. The man in your admin office, the one who was meant to be caught, his capture buys Locke's network approximately 4 hours before they determine the approach failed and activate the contingency. Based on when he was taken, she looked at her watch. You have roughly 2 hours and 40 minutes before the contingency moves. What's the contingency? Voss said. Sandra looked at Claire. Not at Voss, at Claire. And Claire understood with the particular clarity of someone who has just identified the shape of the trap they are standing in that Sandra Reeve had not come to this hospital just to warn her. The contingency is me, Claire said. Sandra nodded once. Locke doesn't want the archive, Claire said. Not primarily. He wants to eliminate the only person alive who can testify to how it was obtained, what it contains, and what it proves. The archive without me is documents. With my testimony, it's a case. He's coming for you specifically, Voss said. Not him personally, Sandra said. He has significant distance between himself and the operational level. But yes, the contingency is a direct action against Claire, timed to activate when the first approach is confirmed failed. 2 hours, 40 minutes, Calloway said. Give or take, Sandra said. Calloway stood up. He moved to the corner of the room and pulled out his phone and made a call that lasted 30 seconds and consisted almost entirely of a series of precise numerical codes that Claire recognized as SEAL Team Emergency Mobilization Protocol. He hung up and turned back to the room. I have a team 22 minutes out, he said. This is not a military operation, Voss said sharply. I cannot authorize my daughter was used as bait, Calloway said, and his voice carried something in it that was not anger and not grief and was considerably more dangerous than either. My daughter had a tracking device in her shoulder for 6 weeks. I don't need your authorization. Calloway, Voss. Claire's voice cut between them, quiet and clean. Both men stopped. We don't have time for jurisdiction. She looked at Voss. You need his team. You cannot cover this building the archive in a direct action contingency with the personnel you have here. You need more bodies, and you need bodies that know how to move. She looked at Calloway. And you need his access and his authority, because when this is done, When the archive surfaces and the testimony goes on record, the last thing you want is a legal chain of custody that a good defense attorney can break on the grounds of unauthorized military action. Both men were silent. "We do this together," Claire said. "All of it, every piece, and we do it in the next 2 hours and 38 minutes. Voss looked at Calloway. Calloway looked at Voss. Something passed between them, the particular assessment of two professionals who have just realized they need each other and are each deciding whether to trust that need. "Your team lands in 22 minutes, Voss said. 20 now, Calloway said. "I need 5 of them on building perimeter. The rest work with my agents on internal sweep." He paused. "And I need access to your encrypted communications channel to coordinate without broadcasting on any frequency that Locke's people might be monitoring." "Done," Calloway said. They looked at Claire. "What do you need?" Calloway said. Claire thought about Emma in the recovery room. She thought about Kodiak sitting beside the bed with his steady amber eyes and his vigilant patience. She thought about Marcus Webb, who had gone back to the trauma bay like she'd asked, and was probably standing at the nurse's station right now trying to make sense of the night he'd just lived through. She thought about Donna, who had 22 years of hard-won steadiness and who had looked scared for the first time Claire had ever seen. She thought about a life she had built very carefully, very quietly in a city she had chosen because it was unremarkable, because it asked nothing of her, because it was the kind of place where a person could breathe without being watched. She thought about what it had cost to build it. She thought about what it was going to cost to leave it. "I need the archive transferred to a secure federal server in the next 30 minutes, she said. "Once it's off the drop site and into protected custody, I lose my value as the only access point. That removes me as a target." "I can have that done in 20, Voss said. "Do it in 15, Claire said. "And I need—" She stopped. Sandra was watching her, the gray-green eyes patient and unreadable. "I need to know why you came," Claire said, directly to Sandra. "The real reason, not the warning, not the information about Locke. You could have sent all of that through channels that don't involve walking into a hospital and asking for me by call sign." She paused. "Why are you here, Sandra?" The room waited. Sandra's hand moved on the coat in her lap. Once, the only tell she had. "Because I built Iron Veil," she said. "I designed it. I handed it to a man I trusted, and he turned it into something I would never have agreed to build. And a girl who should have had nothing to do with any of it spent 6 weeks with a tracking device in her shoulder." Her voice remained even. Her hands remained still. Only the gray-green eyes moved, holding Claire's face with something that was as close to accountability as that expression ever came. "I came because I owe you the truth in person. Not through a channel, not in a document." She paused. "And because I came to make sure that when this is done, when the archive is transferred and the testimony is on record, and Locke's people have been rolled up, you don't disappear again." Claire looked at her. "You've been running for 4 years, Sandra said quietly now, the professional distance contracting slightly. "You built a good life here. I've watched you build it, and I'm telling you, you don't have to run from it. Not anymore, not after tonight." Something in Claire's chest pulled tight. She did not let it show. "Let's get through tonight first," she said and turned to Voss. "Start the transfer. Right now." Voss moved. Calloway moved. Sandra stayed seated watching Claire, and Claire felt the weight of that gaze on her back as she crossed the room to where Voss was already working on the transfer protocol. As the clock on the wall clicked forward as somewhere in the hospital, a dog pressed his nose to a young woman's wrist and read her pulse and found it steady. 18 minutes remained before Calloway's team arrived, 2 hours and 23 minutes before the contingency activated. And somewhere in this city, in a car or a building or a nondescript room that looked like nothing from the outside, a man with 4 stars and a 40-year career and a procurement record he needed buried was waiting for confirmation that his problem had been solved. He was about to receive a very different kind of confirmation instead. Claire looked at the clock, and she began. The transfer took 14 minutes and 22 seconds. Claire watched the progress bar on Voss's screen the way she had once watched fuel gauges on night missions, not with anxiety, but with the particular focused patience of someone who understands that some things cannot be rushed and that watching them does not make them faster. She simply needed to know the exact moment it was done. When the confirmation code came through, Voss exhaled through his nose. A small sound, barely audible, but Claire heard it. "It's in federal custody," he said. "Encrypted timestamp, chain of custody established." He looked at her. "It's done." Claire nodded once. "You're no longer the only access point," Voss continued. Which means I'm no longer the target," Claire said. "In theory." "In theory," Voss agreed, and the qualifier sat between them like a small, honest stone, because theory and the next 2 hours were two entirely different things. The contingency that Sandra had described did not run on logic. It ran on orders that had already been given to people who had already been positioned, who would not receive a stand-down until someone with the authority to issue one decided to issue it. And General Warnlock was not yet in custody. He was not yet aware that the archive had transferred. He was not yet aware that the night had moved decisively against him. Until he was, the clock was still running. Calloway came through the conference room door at a controlled pace that was as close to running as a man of his discipline allowed himself in a public building. "My team is 4 minutes out," and he said, "I've got them coming in through the service entrance on the south side, unmarked vehicles, plain clothes. Voss, I need your agents to stand down at the south perimeter, or we're going to have a very avoidable problem in the next 3 minutes." Voss was already on his radio. Sandra Reeves sat in her chair and watched all of it with the composed attention of a woman attending a performance she had seen many times before in many different theaters. Claire glanced at her. "The contingency team?" Claire said to her. "Do you know their entry point?" "If I were running it," Sandra said, "I would use the ambulance bay. It's the one entrance in this building with legitimate high-traffic cover at any hour, and it requires the least explanation for armed personnel to approach." "Voss," Claire said. "I heard her," Voss said. He relayed the information to his radio. Then he looked at Claire. "I need you in a secure location. With the archive transferred, you are still the primary witness. You are still the testimony. If Locke's people cannot retrieve the documentation, the next play is eliminating the person who can explain what it means," Claire said. "I know." "Claire," Calloway's voice, low and direct, "let us move you." "No," Claire said. The word landed in the room with a particular finality that made both men go still. "If I disappear into a secure location," Claire said, "this building is still full of people who have been exposed to this situation tonight. Donna, Marcus, the OR nurses who saw a man who shouldn't have been there. If Locke's team comes in and I'm not here, they improvise. And when trained operatives improvise in a building full of civilians..." She stopped. "I'm not moving." "That is not a rational risk assessment," Voss said. "It's a completely rational risk assessment," Claire said. "It's just one that weights other people's safety over my own, which I understand is inconvenient for your planning." Calloway looked at her for a long moment. Then he said to Voss, "She's right." "Commander, she's right," Calloway repeated. "If we pull her, they have no confirmed target. Unpredictable operatives in an uncontrolled environment. That's worse." He looked at Claire. "So we use you. We put you in a visible, controlled position. We know they're coming in through the ambulance bay. We let them come in. And we're waiting for them when they do," Claire said. "Yes," Calloway said. Voss pressed his lips together. Then he nodded. "My people need 3 minutes to position." "You have 2, Calloway said. "My team is 90 seconds out." In the 90 seconds that followed, the conference room became a very focused, very efficient machine of preparation. Voss coordinated his agents by radio in the clipped shorthand of someone who has done this enough times that full sentences are a luxury. Calloway texted his team in numerical codes that looked like nothing and meant everything. Sandra Reeves stood and buttoned her coat and said to no one in particular, "I'll take the East Corridor Junction." And when both men looked at her, she met their eyes with the calm of someone who has just reminded them that they are not the most experienced person in this room and went. Claire watched her go. "Do you trust her?" Calloway asked quietly, coming to stand beside her on the. "I trust that she came here for a reason that matters to her," Claire said. "And I trust that she's been in more rooms like this one than either of us, and she's still alive." She paused. "That's enough for tonight." Calloway nodded, then quietly, "After tonight, when this is done, you don't have to..." He stopped, found a different way in. "Maya asked about you before I left the recovery room. She asked who you really were." "What did you tell her?" "I told her you were someone who saved her life." He paused. "She said that was obvious and that wasn't what she asked." Despite everything, something almost like a smile crossed Claire's face. Just briefly. She's going to be fine, she said. She is, Calloway said, because of you. He let a beat pass. You've been alone out here for 4 years. I've been safe, Claire said. That's not the same thing, he said. And I think you know that. Claire did not answer that. But she didn't disagree either, and Calloway, who had spent his career reading people in high-pressure environments, registered the silence with quiet precision. His phone vibrated. He looked at it. Team is in the building, he said. Then let's go, Claire said. She walked back into the main corridor of St. Augustine Trauma Center at 1:34 in the morning, and the hospital moved around her exactly as it always did the night shift, living its particular life steady and unglamorous. The business of keeping people alive at the hour when the world's attention was elsewhere. Donna was at the nurse's station. She looked up when Claire came through. Her eyes tracked the expression on Claire's face the way Donna tracked everything, with the comprehensive, unsentimental attention of a woman who had seen enough to know when something was off and when something was genuinely serious. Claire, she said. Everything's fine, Claire said. I need you to do something for me. Of course you do, Donna said without sarcasm. Just the tired affection of someone who has accepted the situation they are in. Move all non-critical staff away from the ambulance bay entrance. Do it naturally. Reassignment supply runs, whatever makes sense. I need that area clear of civilians in the next 4 minutes. Donna looked at her for one long second. How many fingers am I holding up? She said. Claire blinked. What? It's a concussion check, Donna said. I'm checking to see if you've lost your mind. She held up 3 fingers. How many, Donna? 3, Claire said. I know it's 3. And I haven't lost my mind. I need 4 minutes. You need to tell me if my staff is in danger, Donna said, and her voice had dropped every layer of dry humor and landed on something solid and immovable. Tell me that first. Everything else second. Claire looked at her. Clear the area and they won't be, she said. That's the truth. Donna held her gaze for another beat. Then she picked up her radio and started talking. Marcus was at the medication station. Claire caught his eye and shook her head once, and he understood he had the good instincts she'd known he had, and he stayed put and kept his attention on his patients and did not ask questions, and she was briefly sincerely grateful for him. She positioned herself near the ambulance bay entrance, close enough to be visible, far enough back to have angles. She could feel Voss's agents around her. She couldn't see most of them, but she could sense the arrangement of the room, the particular way certain people were standing, the weight distribution that said trained rather than casual. Calloway's team had folded into the building like they'd been here all night. She waited. At 1:41 a.m., the ambulance bay doors opened. There were 3 of them. They came in with the practiced confidence of people who had done this before, moving in a formation that looked to the untrained eye like 3 people arriving with purpose in a busy hospital. They had credentials visible on lanyards. They had the right kind of pace. They had done everything correctly. But Claire had been trained by the same school that trained people like them, and she saw the formation for what it was. Coverage pattern principle in the center flanks, managing sight lines, everyone's right hand slightly forward of their hip. The one in the center saw her. For exactly half a second, they looked at each other. And in that half second, Claire understood something that recalculated everything. She knew him, not from Iron Veil, not from any operations she had run or any briefings she had attended. She knew him from before all of that, from a training facility in Virginia, from a hand-to-hand course on a rainy Tuesday, from the particular way he tilted his head when he was recalibrating. His name was Carter. He had been 2 cohorts ahead of her. He had been at one point considered one of the most promising operators in the program. And he was here in this hospital working for the man who had corrupted everything they had both signed up to be. Carter, she said. He stopped. His flanks did not stop. They continued their approach for exactly 2 more steps before they registered that he had stopped and adjusted accordingly. The micro-hesitation in their movement told Claire they had not been briefed on this possibility that someone here might know their principle. Stand down, Claire said, and she directed it at him, not at his team. Carter's jaw worked. Claire, you know what happened to this operation. You know what Locke did with it. You know, I have my orders, he said. Your orders come from a man who used an active intelligence mission to protect himself from a criminal investigation, Claire said. Her voice was level and it carried, and she knew Voss was hearing every word of it. The archive has been transferred to federal custody. It's done. Whatever you came here to do tonight, it's already too late. And if you take another step, you're not protecting an operation. You're obstructing a federal investigation into a two-star general. Carter's flanks looked at him. He looked at Claire. The documentation is gone, Claire said. It's in federal hands right now. Your principal is going to be in a committee hearing in 11 days staring at his own procurement records. There is no version of tonight that changes that. The only version of tonight that still matters is the one where you decide what side of this you are standing on when it's done. Carter breathed in, out. His right hand moved away from his hip. Behind him, both flanks shifted their weight. It was subtle. It was the shift of people who have just decided something without discussing it. And that was when Voss's agent stepped out. And Calloway's team came around from the service corridor. And the ambulance bay became very, very still. Carter looked around the room. He looked at Claire. Something moved through his face, something she recognized because she had felt it herself once in a different corridor, in a different country, in the moment when a person who has been moving in one direction for a long time finally sees clearly enough to stop. He raised both hands. His team followed. The room moved with practiced efficiency, Voss's agents forward, Calloway's team securing the exits. Radios crackling with confirmations. Claire stepped back and let it happen and stood against the wall and breathed. Her hands were completely steady. She noticed that. She was surprised by it slightly. And then she was not surprised because she understood that her hands had always been steadiest in the moments that mattered most. That was not bravado. That was simply how she was built. She had spent 4 years trying to build something different, and tonight had shown her what was underneath when everything else stripped away. Voss came to her side. We have all three. No shots fired. He paused. That could have gone a very different way. I know, Claire said. You knew him, Voss said. Carter. We trained together, a long time ago. Voss was quiet for a moment. Then, I'm going to need a full debrief. Everything. Iron Veil, the 7 hours, the archive, what you moved and how. Everything. I know, Claire said. It's going to take time. I know that too, Claire said. And your cover. He hesitated. Clare Mercer. This identity. After tonight, it's going to be complicated, Claire said. Compromised, Voss said more honestly. She had known that. She had known it since the moment she walked toward the front desk to talk to Sandra Reeve. She had known it really from the second she spoke 2 words to a Belgian Malinois in a trauma bay and watched every person in the room understand that she was not who they thought she was. Can I have an hour, she said. Voss looked at her. An hour for what? Before the debrief, before any of it becomes official. She met his eyes. An hour. He studied her face, then he nodded. 1 hour. She went to the recovery room. Emma was awake. The color in her face was better, not good yet, not normal yet, but moving in that direction, finding its way back the way people do when the crisis has passed and the body starts to believe it. Kodiak was at her bedside, his head resting on the mattress beside her hand, his amber eyes tracking Claire as she came through the door. Hey, Emma said. Her voice was still hoarse but stronger. Hey, Claire said and sat in the chair beside the bed. My dad came back a little while ago, Emma said. He told me it was over, that everyone was safe. She paused. He didn't tell me much else. No, Claire said. He wouldn't. Emma looked at her. The focused, direct look each had given Claire in this same room hours before. You're not just a nurse, she said. Not a question. Not said with drama. Just said the way you say something you have already understood and are simply confirming out loud. I'm a nurse, Claire said. That part is real. Everything I did tonight in this hospital, that was real. She paused. The other parts are also real. Both things can be true. Emma was quiet for a moment. Were you scared tonight? Claire thought about the honest answer. She thought about Carter's eyes in the ambulance bay. She thought about the weight of the archive living in a dead drop for 4 years. She thought about the particular cold of hearing her own call sign spoken in a hospital corridor in a city where no one was supposed to know it existed. Yes, she said, different kind of scared than most people mean when they use that word. But yes. Emma nodded slowly. Then Kodiak likes you. I know. Claire looked at the dog. His tail moved once. He's a good dog. He doesn't like anyone, Emma said. He tolerates my dad. He follows me everywhere. He has never in 8 months voluntarily gone to another person. She looked at Claire carefully. He went to you, without a command. In the OR corridor when you came out, he just went. Claire looked at Kodiak. He looked back at her with those amber eyes that had been the first thing to test her when she walked into that trauma bay, and the night had not yet become what it became. Animals know things, Claire said. What did he know about you? Claire thought about that for a long moment. That I would take care of you, she said finally. That was the wow, and I was going to do it. Emma's eyes filled the way they had before, and this time she didn't push it back down. She let one tear track down the side of her face and didn't wipe it away. Thank you, she said. Claire nodded. She didn't say, you're welcome, because the words felt insufficient for the weight of what Emma was thanking her for, and she had never been someone who offered words that couldn't bear the weight they were asked to carry. She stayed for 11 minutes. Not the full hour, 11 minutes was what the moment needed, and she had learned long ago to measure time by what it required, not by what she wished it could be. When she stood to leave, Emma said, what happens to you now? Debriefs, Claire said. A lot of them. And after that, Claire looked at the door. She thought about Donna at the nurse's station. She thought about the window of the break room where she sometimes sat between shifts and drank bad coffee and listened to the building settle. She thought about 3 weeks of learning the rhythm of this particular ER, this particular team, this particular version of the work she had always done, stripped of all the layers that had once made it unrecognizable. I don't know yet, she said. She said it honestly, because she didn't. There were processes now, official ones, federal ones, the grinding machinery of accountability that would take months and produce documentation and require her presence in rooms she had no desire to sit in. There was Locke, who would not go quietly, who had lawyers and connections and 4 decades of institutional armor to deploy. There was the question of her identity, her cover, the careful architecture of Clare Mercer, and what survived the night. But there was also this hospital, these people, this work. And there was the fact that when Voss had said her cover was compromised, she had felt something unexpected, not relief, not resignation, something closer to resistance. Something that said, I built this, I chose this, and I am not finished with it. She walked out of the recovery room. Sandra was waiting in the corridor. Of course she was. She had the particular gift of positioning herself exactly where a conversation needed to happen. Well, Sandra said. Well, Claire said. You could come back, Sandra said. Properly. There are people who would. It wouldn't be the same as before. Nothing would be the same as before. But there is a place for someone with your specific no, Claire said. Sandra received this without surprise. No to coming back or no to the conversation? No to coming back, Claire said. Yes to the conversation because you deserve an honest answer. She looked at Sandra directly. I'm not the person you trained anymore. I'm not the person who ran Iron Veil. I am also not only a nurse at a trauma center, and tonight made that very clear to me. And I'm going to have to figure out what it means to be both of those things in the same body. She paused. But I'm not going back. That world took enough. Sandra looked at her for a long moment. The gray-green eyes doing what they always did, measuring, cataloging, understanding more than they were given. All right, Sandra said, just that. All right, it was more than Claire had expected from her, and she felt it land with the particular weight of something genuinely meant. Calloway found her at the nurse's station at 2:17 a.m. He had the look of a man who had just completed a mission and not yet had time to feel the full cost of it. He would feel it later, she knew that, because she knew that look on herself. Locke is in federal custody, he said quietly. Voss got the authorization through 20 minutes ago. He was at his residence. Apparently he did not go quietly. He paused. They never do. No, Claire said. The 3 operatives from the ambulance bay are in processing. Carter, he stopped. He's cooperating. Claire nodded. She had thought he would. Whatever had brought Carter to that place in his life, he had stopped when she spoke to him, and that mattered. Claire. Calloway put his hand on the counter beside her, close to her hand, but not touching it. When the debrief is done, when all of this is processed, I want you to know, he paused, finding the right shape for it. Emma's going to be in and out of this hospital for follow-up appointments for the next few months. Neurology, PT, the usual process. He looked at the station around them. It would be good for her to have a familiar face here. Claire looked at him. I'm not offering you something, he said quickly, reading her expression. I'm just telling you, as a father, that she trusts you. And that trust is not a small thing, and I don't want to see it. He stopped. I don't want her to come back here and find out you're gone. Claire was quiet for a moment. Donna walked past them, charting something on a tablet, and glanced at Claire on her way past with the particular look as she had comprehensive unsentimental, the look that said, I see what's happening here, and I have opinions, and kept walking. Marcus was at the medication station. He caught Claire's eye and gave her a small nod. The kind of nod that meant, I don't know what happened tonight, but I know you were in the middle of it, and I know this place is different because you were here. Claire looked at the whiteboard on the wall. Patient names, bed assignments, the ordinary choreography of the night shift. She looked at the clock. She looked at the doors through which Emma Calloway's gurney had come hours ago with a military dog pressed against the rail, and every trained professional in the building frozen. She thought about two words spoken quietly in the chaos of a trauma bay, and what they had cost her and what they had given back. She turned to Calloway. Tell Emma I'll be here, she said. He nodded once, just once. She turned back to the nurse's station, picked up a chart, and went back to work. Because that was who she was, not just the woman who had run Iron Veil and moved what needed to be moved and disappeared when the world required her to disappear. Not just Ghostbird call sign and legend and the blank space in a 7-hour window that had kept powerful men awake for 4 years. She was also the nurse who had walked into that trauma bay and stood still when everyone else was scrambling and calculated and moved with precision when precision was needed, and who had kept a 19-year-old girl alive through the longest night either of them had ever lived. Both things were true. Both things were hers. And Clare Mercer, who had chosen this name and this city and this work with the deliberate care of someone who understands that identity is not given but built piece by piece in the choices you make when no one is watching, and in the choices you make when everyone is. Clare Mercer was not finished building. She had only just begun.